Quickly, Dennis Bernstein, who's the backup for Jonathan Quick this season?
Jack Campbell. Peter Budai's great. He's going to probably mentor Cal Peterson down in Ontario. But Jack proved himself last year. I think it was a great trade to bring him in. And obviously they have this magical potion that Imu and Bill Ranford feed these goaltenders. So I think he showed very well when he was pressed into service last year. I think he's the backup next season.
John, Drew Doughty, 8 years, $88 million. What do you think of the contract?
I think it's fine. It's right what you would have expected. You know, there was talk there for a while that there might be some discussions around 13, 14 million, and that would have been a real problem for LA given their cap situation. I don't think you could pay him any less. Totally fine with the number, and like I said all along, it was fake news. Drew Doughty was going nowhere.
There you go. I love it. Jesse Cohen, which player has the most at stake for this upcoming season?
Oh, man. Tyler Toffoli.
Okay. We've talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
Toffoli is number one, but I'm just saying, it's going to be interesting to see with Kovalchuk, and he's got to prove himself again. I mean, granted, he's got a 3-year contract, 2 years guaranteed, but if he comes back and he scores 13, 14 goals, that's something embarrassing for him.
Dennis, if you could make one legitimate trade to improve this team in the first few weeks of the season, what would it be?
Well, I mentioned I think they should be all in this year. So the trade I would have made, and maybe you could still make it because he's a rental, I go get Max Pacioretty from the Canadians. It would be a discounted price now. Who knows what's going on over there? He is a rental. I know that everybody on the panel is crazy about rentals. Don't make rentals, with respect to, Sakara and Lucic. But I would have gone all in this year. I really see an opportunity to get to a cup final with this team. I would have traded Max. I would have gave him I would have traded for Max. I would have gave him Muzzin. Would have gave him Anderson Dolan. I know you love him. I think he's going to be a great prospect. I would have went Pacioretty, Kovalchuk, Pearson on the left side, scared teams, scared them to making another move. And I just think that we talked about offense, all this panel. I would have really just gone all in this year because I just see opportunity. Even in the Central Division, Nashville's going to be good. Winnipeg's going to be good. But I just see the way this team is added with Kovalchuk. I would have added one more piece on the left side, made him really dangerous, and then taken my chances. And sometimes you got to give up a player or two with the specific prospects. But that's the player I would have made because I think this made this team really, really dangerous. Plus, you mentioned the contract year. Another player in his contract year. If he leaves, fine. That's great. I think the goal this year is to get to the Cup final. And I think one more sterile left wing like Pacioretty, that's the trade I would have made.
Great. Brian, how are you liking the Kings' defense coming into the season? What do we think about Dion Phaneuf, Paul LeDoux, some of those guys?
We haven't really talked about defense this entire thing, like he just mentioned. And I guess everybody's like, well, hey, they won the Jennings and they gave him the least amount of goals, so the defense is fine. I'm a little concerned about that. Look, you've got Drew Doughty, and that makes up for a lot of, and he's going to play half the game anyway. And, Martinez and Muzzin are all really great players, but Phaneuf is slow and getting slower. LeDoux is still not necessarily, in my opinion, a top 6, maybe 5 or 6 defensemen. Same thing with Fontenberg and Forbert and these guys. So I'm not thinking that this is like the best defense in the league, in my opinion, at least.
I don't have a problem with the defense. I would play Muzzin up with Doughty, but you can play Forbort with Doughty. I think, back to the question from earlier about players and that really have to make their mark or something's at risk this season. I think it's Muzzin and Martinez. One of those two players is going to be gone, is going to go next summer. And, we can leave that as the elephant in the room and not talk about it. But the reality is when you look at the contract situation, when you look at the young players coming up, most likely Muzzin or Martinez are going to go either at the trade deadline or at next summer. So agreed. I think one of those players has to emerge, and we've seen the pendulum swing back and forth. People love Martinez, and it's Muzzin that wants, they want to leave, and then it goes back the other way, and it's Muzzin and let Martinez go. And I just think that one of those players has to emerge, has to solidify their position and make the point that, hey, you don't want to trade me, because if you were to go out and get a Max Pacioretty at the trade deadline, which I would do that trade, Dennis, at the trade deadline. I wouldn't have done it this summer. Mm-hmm. I'd wait and see if this team is legit, and at the trade deadline, maybe move somebody, and then it's going to be Muzzin or Martinez.
But then you start getting into weird game theory, where it's like, let's say Muzzin clearly separates himself from Martinez, but Martinez has a great season. well, don't you get more in value by trading Muzzin? And now maybe you don't want to be the tall dandelion that gets his head cut off. I mean, I hear what you're saying as far as
You've really thought this out,
it
Jesse.
being it literally just occurred.
Yes,
to me.
you could trade him. You could get the player for more value and trade him. Fine.
But the point is,
But I want to be the guy who has a better season.
Sure, but the point is this team could dip 6 spots in defensive effectiveness, right? Like they could not win the Jennings Trophy next year and be the 5th worst defensive team or the 6th worst defensive team, and they're still.
I think you mean the
one
5th
of
best.
Thank you.
Okay.
But they're
if
still
if
one
they're
of
a
the
top
best
10
defensive
offensive
teams.
team, yeah. But
Even if they're not, right?
they
Even
move,
if they're the 16th best offensive team and the 5th best defensive team, that's still a better combination than most of the teams in the league. You still have a Norris Trophy contender. You still have a Jonathan Quick in net. Yeah. You still have a Selke Trophy winner. You know what I mean?
I'm looking for Fantenberg or Ledoux to emerge this season, though, and to help that transition of one of those other defensemen to be available.
They're going to have to.
They're going to have to make that happen, though. But they don't. Fantenberg and Ledoux, they're not the linchpins to the season because you're talking about your third defenseman. The top 4 set. You have 5 defensemen that you can rotate in that top 4 between Doughty, Muzzin, Martinez, and Phaneuf and Forbort. So. It doesn't hinge on Ledoux, it doesn't hinge on Fantenberg, but those guys are going to have to emerge to make one of those other players expendable. And you also have Cale Clegg coming through the pipeline, who a year from now will be making a push for the team.
He's going to be a very good player, too.
Phaneuf is the key in terms of how far he drops off. Like, I liked what he brought to the table when he first got there. You could tell he was re-energized. Mm-hmm. You know, I like the semi-dirtiness that he brings, which you still need to a degree. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. I'll call it dirtiness, the edginess. But he did kind of slow down a little bit. And now, full season, what's he going to be like 60 games in?
You need him as a third pairing. You don't want him up. They were giving him time as a second pairing D last year, and you don't want him there. You want him as your third pairing, and he should be fine. You can protect his minutes, and he should be okay.
You know, one of the lasting impressions of last year for me, and I haven't been the biggest fan of Derek Forbort, right? Because I constantly had mentioned over the last seasons that you could have drafted Tarasenko in front of Forbort. But what I always remember about last season was that ear injury that he had. And he did a post-game interview where his ear hanging half off his head. Jesus. And like to him, he really, to me, he's not the most glamorous defenseman in the league. He'll never be. He's playing next to Doughty. Who wants that? Who wants that from an optic standpoint? But he really showed me that he's tough. He's a warrior. He's part of their top 4. He may be the 4th of the top 4, but I don't think they're hurt now by him. He's never going to create offense, but just his gameness and that to be able to play through injury like that, it just really impressed me that this kid's a keeper. He's ready to play. He'll stand up and he'll produce for this team.
He's Rob Scuderi light. He's not that warrior player, but he's Rob Scuderi light in the sense that the less you hear his name, the better he's playing. Exactly. You're not going to hear about Derek Forbort. He's just going to go out there night in and night out, play 10 games in a row, and be solid defensively. To me, he's Rob Scuderi light.
He's really established himself last year, and that, to me, was a seminal moment for him as a king.
And there were 2 or 3 times he fought. Like, you could tell that's not in his comfort zone.
He also fought in the American Hockey League, too, so he's not afraid in the right situation to drop the gloves. He has a feisty side to him.
A horrific fighter. Like, the drummer from Def Leppard is a better fighter. But I like guys who do it anyway and, like, say, this is for the team. I'm going to get my butt kicked, but this is to protect Doughty. And I think once it was to protect Clifford, who you would think. But it was just, I love him. Excellent player.
We spent 40 to 50 minutes talking about Brodzinski, Amadio, Kempe, Afalo, all these forwards that are going to have their opportunity. John mentioned briefly Cale Clegg, but you also have Alex Lintuniemi, and you have, you can shake your head all you want.
He's not pushing for a job in the NHL.
Maybe not in this season, but the point is you have a stable of young defensemen in Ontario who maybe not this year, but next year, the year after that, they don't have to come in and be Derek Forbort. All they have to do is come in and be Daniel Brickley.
Right.
Or
Austin Strand, who was a free agent they picked up, is going to possibly be in the conversation in a year from now.
And it's not flashy to talk about defensive prospects because if you have a guy like Drew Doughty was never a prospect. Drew Doughty was an NHL player before he was drafted. But there are guys developing in Ontario. And
McDermott.
Well, I think Walker, isn't he a defenseman down there?
I'd keep a close eye on Brickley because Brickley probably doesn't have a spot on the team this year. If you're going to carry 7 defensemen, it's going to be Ledoux and Fantenberg that are going to be your 6 and your 7. which means Brickley doesn't have a team.
Well, then there's another name you
You
add
could
to the
send
prospect
Amadio
list.
down, and you could make a spot for Brickley, and you could carry 8 defensemen. But Brickley probably starts the year in the American Hockey League. They're really high on this kid, and he's probably going to be back up with the team at some point this year.
There you go.
You know, similar to when they had to move a Jack Johnson to bring in a Slava Voinov. Brickley's going to get a spot. It's probably just not going to be coming out of camp. So Brickley's coming this year. Cale Clegg's coming after, and then if a Strand or maybe a Linton Niemi or one of these other guys emerges, all of a sudden you do have a defensive prospect group that is exciting to talk about.